thank you all for tuning in for today's program broadcast. This is brought to you by Utopia Broadcasting Company, and this episode was made possible by our loyal following on YouTube on the channel Unknown Entity. Thank you for subscribing to our multimedia platform, and without further ado, we're going to get right into today's episode. Be sure to like and subscribe. Actually, we're going to start this one off with a soundbite from former President Donald Trump, and we're not going to be airing the current president's soundbites because he's not a serious person, and he's had a really bad time. There's a lot of negative soundbites, and generally he doesn't know what he's talking about most of the time Joe Biden speaks, so it's not worth really wasting the time to poke fun at him because it's just low-hanging fruit at this point. I mean, it's only gotten worse, but it's been this way for a long time, ever since he became president. So without further ado, and we'll do some analysis of this.
I think it's a very sad time for our country. We're not respected anywhere in the world. He's not respected, and our country is in very serious trouble. And I'll tell you what, if we're not careful, we're going to be right in the middle of World War III, and that will be a war like nobody's seen before because of the weaponry. The weaponry is a whole lot different than two army tanks going up against each other. This is a whole different world.
So global peace has become nothing more than a memory of when someone else was president, because this president doesn't care about global peace at all. He doesn't care, he doesn't want it, and he'd rather just see global tensions escalate, to be honest, or he wouldn't care either way. This is how I feel. I feel the end justifies the means for these people. They don't care about the lives lost, and also they don't care about the accomplishments of the 20th century, where essentially the threat of nuclear war prevented the outbreak of a further world war, and we also prevented the threat of a nuclear war from actually becoming a reality. We working on things like disarmament. They're very important concepts for the American people to get behind. These things prevent war. Working on peace, we became peaceful. The Cold War ended, so we were no longer really at war with Russia, but that's no longer the case now. We're in a new Cold War, unfortunately. All of the solutions, all the things that we did to prevent global proliferation and war have all been for nothing. Nuclear stockpiles are on the steady rise again, and global tensions have never been higher since the Cuban Missile Crisis, apparently. And that's just what everybody says, and I believe it as well, because really the president, the executive branch, and a good chunk of the country wants to go to war with Russia. No holds barred, just all-out war with NATO, a world war that would reshape and affect everyone on the planet and possibly cause the extinction of the species. But this is worth it for them. The ends justify the means. The extinction of everybody, every race or ethnicity, it justifies the means to these people, or they just, in Biden's case, he doesn't expect to live to see the full ramifications of his disastrous actions in the executive authority he's been bestowed. I don't even know why they ran him again for president for a second term. It was a failure the first time for the American people. And now for the Democratic Party, it's a failure because he is a failure. And they're getting behind him. Whoever gets behind Joe Biden is a failure because half the party already hates him. So how is he expecting to win the entire country or the majority of votes? I don't understand that. He was a failure candidate, and during the Democratic primaries, they should have just ran a different candidate and got him to step down years ago. At least step down from re-election, and that would have saved the Democratic Party, but they don't have a better candidate. They don't have a better option. The people who are leading the country, it's not the president, it's the generals, the people in the authority of the military-industrial complex, lobbyists, donors. All these deep state establishment types are the ones actually calling the shots for Biden, and we don't really have any accountability on who that is. We don't know. It could be Hunter Biden. That's what people say. We don't know who's running the country, unfortunately, under this man. And I don't know how you can have this kind of a situation. I don't know how you can have this play out in the long term. No authority for the executive branch. It should be illegal what they're doing. Now, as your podcast host, I would humbly like to advocate that we change the electoral system from a two-party system in this country. Of course, no one's going to do that, but the founders' intentions were never to have a two-party system because it makes the economy and the government just a lot more inefficient. And actually, the government's mostly feckless. That's why I don't believe in government, because it's mostly feckless and incapable. Sure, the executive branch has a lot more authority, But in the grand scheme of things, every election, the next person just comes and undoes all the work of the previous and makes things all in all worse because no one's actually trying to solve anything in the long term. And actually, this last election had a very negative result for society in general. Actually, the world, we've just seen the rise of war, and it's a tragedy because we had a time of peace before COVID and before everything before the election. That's why I firmly believe that if Trump had been president, there wouldn't be war because there's more incentive that he would prevent the mass casualties and loss of life that we see now. But people hate each other to the degree that they're willing to make sacrifices like thousands or tens of thousands dying daily. It seems worth it to meet the ends meet of their own agendas. And so that's definitely Biden. He just went to a conference at NATO talking about strengthening NATO. And I guess the chief of NATO's wife, he talked about her a little bit too, Ian Stoltenberg. But it was really cringe, and this man really, he's said it before too, the only achievement of his he sees, or the main achievement I would say, because he hasn't achieved much, but his only real achievement he can speak of are bounce back jobs from COVID, because he didn't create any new jobs, and the strengthening of NATO, which actually led to the war in Ukraine directly to a degree, because they were talking about making NATO Ukraine a NATO member before the war. Actually, it was being talked about a lot before the war by the vice president, and other people in the executive branch were talking about it. So this scared Russia, and he might have already had plans. He did, even under the Trump administration, but he never would have acted on them, allegedly, until he was feeling forced or pressured in this regard. And so NATO's just been a constant thorn in the side of global peace. And America's the only one paying for it too. European countries don't pay for it. It's not actually keeping the planet more stable or preventing a world war. It's actually going to cause it. Because if you think about it, the expansion of NATO, it's just a threat to Russia. We have two sides. We're just threatening each other, filled with vitriol and hatred for the other side. There's basically a new Red Scare right now for all the Russian people. And this has been going on since the election, at least since the invasion of Ukraine. There's been a massive fear of Russians or Russophobia. I've seen influencers of Russian descent get canceled. Straight racism as well. You know, during COVID, we talked about, all the pundits were very worried about anti-Asian hate or racism. But during this war, where tens of thousands are dying daily and the Russian minorities are the ones conscripted and the main victims of the war, but we're in this like bubble-minded mindset in the U.S. We're in this bubble basically. In Washington, they're all in a bubble. They really don't care about Asian hate or Jewish hate, people hating on Jewish people or hating on any ethnic minority in general. Biden really could care less, because he's just fine with having tens of thousands die daily over a war that doesn't even necessarily better the end goals of the American people. It really doesn't do anything for us besides burn and waste money and resources, squander resources and lives. And he clearly doesn't care about the Russian people at all. And so I get it to a degree, because they're considered the enemy since the Cold War. Right. We just want to fight them and go to war with them and end the world. And I get it, because during the Cold War, that's what it was all about. Even though it was begrudgingly, it wasn't necessarily something we loved. We would have liked to have seen a democratic Russia, but we were always in tight competition or stiff competition with them. But now their economy's been fragmented, and we still feel the need to stoop down into this combative state of mind where we want to start wars when in reality they're a much weaker country, but now they're growing their military at a rapid pace. They're spending all of their money on it, and they have their full military industrial complex is in full swing, so they have wartime production in Russia. They're getting bombed in their cities, so it makes sense. But unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, furthermore, we have Joe Biden, and this man is clearly senile, because it's just like, bro, he should have never ever gotten another election. He should have never been put in this position, because Joe Biden was a failure from the start. Let's be real. Last election, to be honest, I think he was actually underestimated by Trump for his mental condition. He was already on the decline, but somehow he won the election because people just saw past it. And it's true now. Even CNN talks about the cover up of his health. It's been going on for a very, very long time. And this man is not in his prime. He's obviously not in his prime, but he's also not in a stable frame of mind. He can't make educated decisions, and all he cares about is beating Russia, even though the cost is so great. We might as well have already fought a world war over it, and we've lost so many people, not Americans, but people in general. I guess it doesn't matter if you're from another country, but we're all humans, and too many have died, thousands and thousands. The Ukrainians are pawns at this point. We've given millions and millions of dollars just to see millions spent on mass death and mass suffering. And so there's also the potential that the world will be destroyed by this war because Russia still has all their nuclear stockpiles and they're building more. And actually they have some very horrifying weapons. They have much worse weapons than America in terms of nuclear capabilities. They have much worse. Much worse. So there was actually this false theory back in the day that they didn't replenish their xenon or their tritium. So they basically, I guess this is how nuclear weapons work. It's kind of top secret, but speaking for Russian nuclear systems, and it's the same, I suppose, for any nuclear weapons, you have to have this tritium that enhances the yield, but it decays rapidly over the span of like 10 years. So the theory was that during the Cold War, they never replenished their tritium. Obviously, they did replenish their tritium. Do you really want to find out if they put new tritium in the warhead, if it'll go off and have a greater yield? The bombs that Russia's producing now, they have a massive gap over us. In terms of the destructive capabilities, they really don't care either. If it came to no holds barred, like I said, strikes on the U.S. mainland or total nuclear exchange, the Russians wouldn't care. They see it as the end of the world anyways. They wouldn't mind the U.S. just being a crater after this event. And so they've invented weapons that could do just that. Like bombs that last 1,000 years, their radiation never dissipates. These thorium bombs, they're inventing extremely inhumane weapons that could be seen to be extinction level events if actually deployed, and are being planned to be deployed against the United States in a total war scenario. But we really don't understand the capabilities of modern weapons because we're not using these weapons. We haven't used nukes in this capacity since 1945, 1946. We haven't planned to strike any cities. But they have tsunami bombs now too. They can just throw a massive tsunami like 50 meters high, some outrageous number, just inundate coastal cities, because let's be real, most cities are on the coast. Inundate, and also the radiation from those lasts 1,000 years, once again. And so all the water from that tsunami is going to be radioactive. It's all radioactive. So you'll have a giant radioactive tsunami that rushes inland and just contaminates and taints everything for 1,000 years. And you'd have those all up the coast, and I assume some 100-kiloton bombs around the major cities. And I'm talking tens of bombs, if not larger yields, because Russians have larger yield bombs because they're less precise. So like the Tsar Bomba, that's standard now. The Satan II has the same yield, so you'd be seeing Tsar Bombas all over American cities. There'd be nothing left. In summary, there'd be nothing left. So this is considered a worthy risk in order to safeguard the safety of Ukraine, just based on the theory that Russia would invade another country after the war. Well, Joe Biden, it'll clearly not be America that gets invaded after the war unless you start a world war. Because what's Putin going to do? He's going to go and float a flotilla to Cuba, like it's Call of Duty. How does that work? How would that realistically play out? That they could invade us. But he doesn't care about the homeland security. He doesn't care about America. He's worried about these European countries getting invaded when they don't even provide for NATO. They can defend themselves. I mean, really, why are we so worried about European countries getting invaded? We're already fighting a world war. So you're worried about a world war starting while we're already fighting one, essentially. We're fighting this massive proxy war in Ukraine, spending billions of dollars on it. And it's not even the only conflict going on right now. So we have to We just have to save money and stop spending all this money that we don't have when we're also funding other conflicts around the world. It's just a tragedy. And in general, we are already at a state of world war thanks to Biden's policies. So if you want to continue the war, and Putin doesn't want to continue the war, if there were negotiations right now, he would come up with a settlement or a peace deal. And that's just a fact. I don't think Zelensky wants to negotiate, but he's been trying to negotiate. I don't know if he'd negotiate about Crimea, but I feel like if Trump was president, he'd be able to negotiate with Putin. And so we're risking world war over the threat of a European country being invaded once again. And this already happened. It wasn't the end of the world. If it happened again, why don't we just say it happens again, right? Why don't we just do what we should have done to begin with? Safeguard. Okay, let's just put a bunch of weapons aside. Like all the weapons we're giving to Ukraine now, put them aside. If another European country gets invaded, then just send them all over there. Just save up weapons, the most advanced kind that we're already sending to Ukraine. The kind that we were worried about starting a world war back when the war in Ukraine was a new war. Back years ago at this point. Years and years. It's gone on so long. And it's only gotten worse. So we should just save up weapons for whichever country gets invaded next. And honestly, it'll probably be more likely Taiwan at this point. But if Russia does invade another country, and I do believe they will eventually invade another country to disastrous effect, but we should be prepared for that future incident instead of making things worse for the current society on the planet and for humanity in general. We're just atrophying the entire human population of Ukraine. It's really sad to see because nothing's left intact there. It was a beautiful country before the war, but now it's all just a sodden ruin. And it's time we started rebuilding and stop all the fighting. I don't think it's going to accomplish anything. Even if we manage to beat Putin, Russia will still exist and they'll just have another leader that hates America. Because we hate Putin and we hate Russia and we hate the Russian people. We really do hate them as though they were just the same old Soviet communists. And we want to go to war with them so badly, even though they could easily be influenced at least to an economic degree. Because they've been so jaded with American policy regarding Russia and our relations with them. We don't even try diplomacy anymore, and the Russian people have just gone to China and all of our enemies to form alliances that disclude us. So now we have no information, we don't know what's really going on in the world, and we actually don't even track Russian nuclear weapons programs anymore. We don't care, we don't even want to have anything to do with them. And honestly, I don't even think Biden could track all that anyways, so he doesn't care, he just writes them off as evil communists, and we have to kill them all, essentially. I don't see where the line is drawn, but apparently it's just killing all the Russians you can, and it goes on daily. But, the more die, I guess, society just becomes so much better because of their ethnicity, apparently. But this is Joe Biden's line of logic in his policy making. So yeah, Russians bad. Okay, they've been bad since 2016, apparently. But, they're just a racial group, too. They're a group of people living in a country, and they're a very diverse country. I'm not saying the country or the policy of Putin's good, but it's a whole country, and in general, the ethnic minorities get drafted. But these people don't care about minorities. Biden, you really think Biden gives a damn about any minorities? He doesn't. He'll say that, he'll say that practically the only thing he talks about accomplishing in his next term is getting a woman elected. Yeah, because Kamala Harris is going to replace him. Let's just be honest, okay? Vice President Kamala Harris is probably going to have to take over if he does get reelected. So yeah, he'll elect the first woman president, and she'll be awful, and no one will have voted for her. So thank you, Joe Biden. We don't need that accomplishment of yours. We don't really need another unelected person in office. We really don't need anything like that. It completely devalidates the claim that we elected a woman president or something if it wasn't voted on. Then you can't say the country's not racist if you just elect her without votes. But also, it's not about being racist or sexist. The woman is terrible. She cackles and hackles. And if she's not elected, if she just takes over as vice president, that's probably what they'd like, because I couldn't see her winning an election either. Kamala Harris is just the worst. They all want war, they all want mass death, and this is just the current state of society. We're not progressing. We don't want progress. They say a Mars base, or a city on Mars, like Elon Musk talks about, would cost only $2-3 billion, maybe $4. And we spend many, many, many more times that on war, just mass casualty scenarios and destruction. We're clearly not leaving the planet or settling anywhere else. We're just going to keep this up and funding wars like this until the day we go too far, apparently. Because, we used to be so worried about that, but now we don't really seem worried about going too far. So we keep funding the war. We should have just given everything in the past and not given credence to Joe Biden's qualms about World War III then, because now we're closer than ever. And if we cared about what he was saying about starting a world war then, we should be concerned now, because what's changed really? We've just sent more, and the further the war progresses, it's like no holds barred, just send more. Because more people die every day, we might as well kill more people too. So more Russians die daily, more everything. And it's just, at a certain point, after all these years, I think people could just be reasonable and try and come to a settlement or a solution. You would think, right? That's what Trump wants. But clearly that's not on the agenda for anybody in America right now in power. It's the military-industrial complex in power. Putin might want peace, but Putin also started the war. But the American military-industrial complex, they invent all these weapon systems that are so complex. They send them to Ukraine because they want to see their effect on people. It's sick. It's truly sick. They're not trying to save the Ukrainian people. And I am a patriot. But these are the companies that fund wars and make these advanced weapon systems meant for killing. And they're really just using the Russian people as guinea pigs in Ukraine. Using the Ukrainians to test out these massive weapon systems like ATACMS and things, and some very brutal, inhumane weapons as well, just being tested en masse to see their effectiveness in war against the Russian forces, which we allege we're going to be fighting, if you believe the propaganda coming out of the White House that harkens back to the old Cold War days, where we've already learned so many lessons as a species, but it feels like we really haven't learned anything from the mass destructive capabilities at our disposal. And nowadays, we don't even factor the risk of our decisions. Joe Biden doesn't factor the risk of his decisions. He makes whatever decisions people tell him to. He doesn't even think about it. And he's the president of the free world. And the president of the free world right now is the most self-conscious prick. He's the worst. He literally is screwing his own party. He's up there. You say Trump is arrogant, but this man doesn't want to give up power. He wants to ignore the issue and act like everybody's coming after him, like these establishment goons are coming after him, when he is the establishment candidate. Even the people that helped him and held his hand through the last election that was terrible and covered for his health decline, his mental decline, well, he just sells them all out now. So he has truly no constituents. He has no support, no backers. I don't see how he's getting funding right now. And Joe Biden's a disaster. If you hate Trump, I don't know how you think that Trump is worse for the country than Joe Biden, when at least Trump is competent. At least Trump is, they say he's selfish, but he has his own agenda. And so he's not going to let the country just go to hell in a handbasket like Biden, because, Biden doesn't have to be accountable. He's not long for this earth, let's be real. So an old person like Biden just doesn't have many years left to, think about his achievements on this earth. I mean, that may sound a little morbid, but it's a fact. He doesn't have that long to regret his actions, and he has enough to regret already, let's be real. So Joe Biden's just the worst. I feel like Trump at least would have more incentive to run the country and the world a little bit better, and to not have these mass death scenarios like we have going in Ukraine right now. That's just become an absolute meat grinder. Attrition, no one wants to stop it, because we're not rational parties here. No one's taking Putin up on his offers to end the war. We don't want to. We want to keep making money, because we're probably making a good, well, we're spending a lot on the war, but the idea in a lot of the heads of these military contractors is they're going to start making money off of this. They're going to start making money off of the advanced weapon systems they're testing, the innovations they make, and the weapon systems they're able to sell as a result of this war. They're already making a massive killing. So America in general, yeah, we're all losing out. These are tax dollar funds going to Ukraine. We're all making less now. Significantly less due to inflation as well. And the country's just spending and spending and spending. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for America. But these military industrial contractors that are rich and lobbyists, and they just go and make money off of lobbying and selling advanced weapon systems, they're making a killing. They're making an absolute killing, and they're the most corrupt people on the planet that don't care about human lives at all. They're like weapons dealers. Well, they're the ones that are making a massive killing off of this war and continued wars in general, but especially this massive ongoing conflict. They've just been making a killing for years. And so there's a lot of parties involved that don't want it to stop and would rather just see this war continue and possibly more wars break out in the future. They really don't care, and people don't care. That's just a fact. People don't care about you or your entire country in most circumstances. It's all just metrics for them, and they're just trying to pass a quota. They're trying to make more money in any way they can in their industry. It just so happens their field of work is just mass casualty, mass killing, finding the best way to effectively kill a large number of people, apparently. And this is tragic. You know, the war started out bad, but it's just been continuing for too long without a solution. Too long without a solution, and I've seen so many war crimes. There is constant war crimes in Ukraine. Like, I can't even describe, like, beyond just murder. Beyond, just killing people. Beyond that, beyond just... because that's a war crime too, just shooting someone when they've already surrendered. But, much worse stuff. Much worse stuff coming out of that country that no one talks about. No one really cares. They just consider it's like, screw that. It's better if the war just continues. War is war. So let's just keep on going. Meat grinder, it'll end eventually, whatever. We don't really care. We gotta fight the Russians, right? Gotta fight the baddie Russians. But there's just constant crimes against humanity happening in that country. It's become a complete nightmare. A complete nightmare. The tragedy of, like, the dehumanization of both sides. Like, they don't even see themselves as human anymore. And it's just a complete nightmare that never ends. So, for those who want peace, this must be a very hard time under this administration that hasn't seen the likes of peace since he got into office. And, everything... I guess he did one thing to preserve peace, and that was withdraw us from Afghanistan, and that didn't preserve peace at all. Because then the terrorists just got a foothold there. We didn't have a presence. We weren't even in conflict. But as soon as he withdrew, we had a terrorist bomb plot. Multiple people died. Multiple people were left behind on both sides. Contractors, American citizens, just left behind in the dead of night. They just fled and left them all out to dry. So people that were serving their country too, American citizens. That's what this president does. He doesn't care about peace. He did that because he wanted to get us all, we don't have any American soldiers abroad. Yeah, whatever. He completely botched it. It completely botched it. And ever since then, it's just been constant war because other countries saw that. They said, America's not going to have her back. It's just been constant war. So how much did that do for the country? How much peace did that preserve? Withdrawing, we should have been deploying. Might as well have been. Because withdrawing for what? We just withdrew, and then everybody just went and deployed into other countries to start massive wars. Just because they saw our weakness. So it's really a tragedy for humanity. It's gone beyond America at this point. I think Joe Biden's presidency has damaged other countries irreparably. Irreparably. Compared to America and the damage he's done here, it's not even on a comparison level. It's like beyond that. It's beyond comparison. Yeah, sure, he's done a lot of the economic damage to America, but the fact he's just meddling in other countries, like other countries' elections too, CIA does that all the time. But at this point, he's just supporting regime change. Same as old Hillary. We came, we saw, we killed. Whatever. Nothing changes, essentially. It's the same old thing with war. So, I hope you all enjoyed this podcast. It's been a little bit of a long one, but I just wanted to get these thoughts out here and do a little podcast. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully we'll get a guest lined up here soon. I'm struggling with numbers right now, but hopefully in a little bit here we'll get someone lined up. Because it is difficult when I talk politics, have this political commentary. I'm trying to do a podcast, but it's also difficult to get someone in here who's like, as passionate about, preserving human life and not having mass casualties in Ukraine. Because a lot of people are very opinionated, but it's not always the same thing, I know actually Ukrainian people too, but it's also more difficult to have them on the podcast considering they've seen a lot of hardships due to the war on a personal level. Anyways, gang, thank you for watching this podcast episode. If you enjoyed, consider hitting the subscribe button, and I'll catch you all around the next one. I think this has been the third podcast episode so far. Haven't had a guest yet, but I think the fourth one I'll be using my Blue Yeti, so I'll have a better mic. Anyways, gang, thank you for watching. I'll catch you all around the next one. Thank you all for watching. Patreon link will be in the description.